Good evening, and welcome. Tonight, we are not searching for great battles, legendary heroes, or glorious victories. Instead, we are taking a much quieter journey. A journey into the ordinary lives of the Viking people. The men, women, and children who quietly lived more than 1,000 years ago along the rugged coastlines of Scandinavia. Before we begin, allow yourself to become comfortable. Take a slow, gentle breath. Let the worries of today slowly drift away, just like morning mist disappearing above a quiet northern fjord. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else demands your attention. For the next little while, history will move slowly, very slowly. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine the first light of dawn spreading across the far north. The year is somewhere around 900 AD. The air is cold enough to sting your cheeks, yet it carries a freshness that feels almost untouched. Before you stretches a narrow fjord, its still water reflecting towering cliffs that rise into the pale morning sky. The sea is perfectly calm. Not a single ship disturbs its surface. Only gentle ripples drift toward the rocky shoreline, where smooth stones have been shaped by countless centuries of waves. A faint smell of salt mixes with damp earth, pine trees, and the smoke of dying fires that burned through the long northern night. High above, seabirds circle quietly, calling to one another as the world slowly wakes. Farther inland, thick forests cover the hills like a dark green blanket. Beyond them lie valleys, where small Viking farms have stood for generations. This is not the Viking world most people imagine. There are no warriors shouting, no villages burning, no flashing swords. Those moments existed, but they were rare. Most days passed in remarkable silence. Most Vikings were not raiders. They were ordinary people. Farmers, fishermen, blacksmiths, weavers, carpenters, mothers preparing breakfast before sunrise, children chasing one another through wet grass, grandparents quietly repairing fishing nets beside the warmth of a fire. History often remembers kings. It remembers conquerors. It remembers the noise of war. Yet the overwhelming majority of people who ever lived experienced something very different. They simply woke up each morning, worked hard, shared meals with their families, watched the seasons change, and hoped that winter would not be too harsh. Tonight, we will spend our time with those forgotten people. As the sky slowly brightens, the Viking village begins to reveal itself. A cluster of wooden longhouses rests beside the water, their roofs covered with thick layers of grass that help keep warmth inside during the bitter winters. Thin streams of smoke curl gently upward from small openings in the roofs, disappearing into the cool morning air. Simple wooden fences surround tiny vegetable gardens. Nearby, sheep rest quietly on dew-covered grass. A shaggy dog stretches lazily outside one of the houses before beginning another ordinary day. There are no roads, only narrow dirt paths, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. The silence feels almost complete. Then, somewhere inside one of the longhouses, a floorboard softly creaks. Someone has awakened, not because of an alarm clock, not because of a bell, but because the rhythm of nature has always been enough. For the Vikings, the rising sun was the beginning of another day, and another chance to survive, another chance to provide for family, another chance to prepare for the long winter that was never very far away. Very soon, one by one, the wooden doors of the village will begin to open. The quiet story of an ordinary Viking day is about to begin. The first morning in a Viking village. The first sound of the morning is almost too quiet to notice. It is not the voice of a king, nor the roar of a warrior returning from battle. Instead, it is the gentle crackling of a dying fire. Deep inside the longhouse, beneath a blanket of pale gray ash, tiny orange embers continue to glow. They have survived the long northern night, carefully protected by the family before they fell asleep. A Viking household could not simply strike a new fire every morning. Keeping yesterday's fire alive was far easier than starting another one from nothing. An elderly woman slowly kneels beside the stone hearth. Her movements are calm, practiced, almost effortless after decades of repeating the same morning ritual. She places a handful of dry birch bark over the warm embers, then a few thin twigs. For several quiet moments, nothing happens. Only a faint ribbon of smoke rises into the dim light. Then, almost without warning, a tiny yellow flame appears. It dances gently. Another follows. Within moments, the fire is alive once again. Its soft warmth slowly pushes away the night's lingering cold. The smell of fresh wood smoke fills the longhouse. Outside, dawn continues to spread across the valley. Golden light slowly touches the tops of distant mountains before reaching the small Viking village below. Drops of dew cling to every blade of grass. The world feels clean, quiet, almost untouched. This is not a world driven by clocks. No one is late. No one is rushing. The sun alone decides when the day begins. Inside the longhouse, the first rays of light slip through tiny openings in the wooden walls. They reveal a simple home, built not for luxury, but for survival. Long wooden benches line each side of the room. Thick wool blankets remain folded where the family slept only moments before. Bundles of dried herbs hang from heavy roof beams. Leather boots wait patiently beside the doorway. Wooden bowls and rough clay pots rest neatly on sturdy shelves, exactly where they were placed the evening before. Every object inside this house has a purpose. Nothing exists only for decoration. Life here is simple, but every simple thing has been earned through patient hands and countless hours of work. Outside, the village is beginning to wake, and with it, another ordinary day in the Viking world quietly begins. A simple breakfast before a long day. The warmth of the fire slowly spreads through the longhouse. What only moments ago felt cold and silent now begins to feel alive. One by one, family members awaken. A small child quietly rubs sleepy eyes beneath a thick wool blanket. An older brother stretches after another night on a simple wooden bench, covered with soft animal skins. Their father sits up slowly, listening to the familiar sounds of the morning. There is no need for anyone to hurry. The Vikings have learned something that the modern world often forgets. The day is long enough for those who move with patience. Outside, the first rays of sunlight reach the village. The sea remains calm. Thin wisps of mist still drift above the water, slowly disappearing as the morning grows brighter. A pair of ravens glide across the sky before disappearing beyond the pine-covered hills. Inside the longhouse, breakfast is already being prepared. The meal is simple. There are no colorful fruits from distant lands, no sweet pastries, no cups of steaming coffee. Instead, a black iron pot hangs above the fire. Inside, barley porridge gently bubbles as it cooks. A woman stirs it slowly with a long wooden spoon, careful not to let it burn. The pleasant smell of warm grain fills the room. Nearby, fresh bread baked the previous day is cut into thick slices. A small piece of butter is shared carefully among the family. Nothing is wasted. Food is precious. Every loaf of bread represents weeks of work in the fields. Every spoonful of porridge reminds the family of last summer's harvest. If fortune has been kind, there may also be dried fish hanging from the roof beams. It was caught many weeks ago, cleaned with care, and preserved with salt and cold northern air. Today, a few thin pieces are placed beside the bread, not because the family is celebrating, but because a hard day's work lies ahead. The children eat quietly. Even at a young age, they understand that food is not something to be taken for granted. A poor harvest, a violent storm, or an unusually long winter could change everything. Every meal carries quiet gratitude. Outside, more signs of life appear across the village. A farmer opens a wooden gate, allowing sheep to wander into the fresh morning grass. A young boy carries 2 empty wooden buckets toward a nearby stream. Not far away, an elderly fisherman kneels beside his boat. His hands, rough from decades of work, carefully examine every knot in his fishing net. He knows that even the smallest tear could cost him today's catch. Nothing is rushed. Every movement is slow, careful, deliberate. The Vikings understand that patience often brings better results than haste. As breakfast comes to an end, the bowls are wiped clean. Not a single crumb is left behind. The youngest child carries wooden cups toward a barrel of fresh water. Another family member adds more firewood to the hearth before leaving for the fields. Soon, each person will begin a different task. Some will work the land. Others will sail onto quiet waters. Some will remain inside the longhouse, spinning wool, repairing clothing, or preparing food for the evening. No one considers their work unimportant. Every small task helps the family survive another season. The village has now fully awakened. Smoke rises peacefully above every rooftop. Dogs wander along narrow dirt paths. Sheep graze quietly on the hillsides. Gentle waves continue to kiss the rocky shore, just as they have done for countless generations. And as the sun climbs a little higher into the northern sky, another ordinary Viking day truly begins. The morning has passed. Now, the real work awaits. The longhouse and the people who called it home. As the village settles into its daily rhythm, not everyone leaves for the fields or the sea. Some remain behind. The longhouse, so quiet only an hour ago, becomes the heart of family life once again. To modern eyes, it might seem small, dark, and simple. Yet for a Viking family, this single building is far more than a house. It is a shelter against winter storms, a workshop, a kitchen, a place of learning, and above all, it is home. From the outside, the longhouse appears strong and solid. Its thick timber walls are carefully fitted together, built to withstand years of wind, rain, and heavy snow. The roof is covered with layers of turf and grass. In spring and summer, tiny wildflowers sometimes bloom across its surface, making the house seem almost like a natural part of the hillside itself. There are no glass windows. Only small openings allow light and fresh air to enter. Because of this, the inside remains dim for much of the day. But the Vikings do not mind. Their eyes have grown used to the soft glow of firelight. The hearth remains the center of everything. The fire is never simply a source of warmth. It is where meals are cooked, where wet clothes are dried, where tools are repaired, where stories are shared, long after the sun has disappeared beyond the mountains. Without the fire, life during the northern winter would be almost impossible. Near the hearth, an elderly grandmother quietly spins wool into thread. Her hands move slowly, steadily, without hesitation. She has repeated this simple task thousands of times. She no longer thinks about each movement. Her fingers remember what her mind no longer needs to command. Beside her, a young girl watches carefully. She says very little. She simply observes. This is how knowledge is passed from one generation to the next. Not through books, not through classrooms, but through patient observation and years of practice. Across the room, another woman sits beside a wooden chest filled with carefully folded clothing. Every garment has taken weeks, sometimes months, to create. The wool first had to be collected from sheep, then washed, carded, spun into thread, dyed with plants gathered from forests and fields. Finally, every stitch was sewn by hand. A single cloak represented hundreds of hours of quiet work. Nothing inside the longhouse is easily replaced. A broken bowl is repaired. A torn tunic is carefully stitched. A cracked wooden handle is carved again, instead of thrown away. The Vikings waste very little, not because they wish to, but because every object has value. Outside, children laugh as they chase one another through the grass. Their games require no expensive toys. A smooth stone, a carved piece of wood, or simply imagination is often enough to fill an afternoon with adventure. Nearby, an old man sits on a wooden stool beneath the morning sun. A block of oak rests across his knees. Using only a sharp knife, he slowly shapes the wood into the handle of a new farming tool. Small curls of fresh wood fall silently onto the ground. The smell of newly cut timber drifts gently through the cool air. There is no hurry. Good work cannot be rushed. The old craftsman understands this well. Every careful cut today may allow the tool to serve the family for many years to come. And inside the longhouse, as the fire continues to burn softly and quiet conversations drift through the smoky air, life moves forward, just as it has for countless seasons. Not with excitement, not with glory, but with patience, purpose, and the quiet comfort of home. The longhouse and the people who called it home. As the village settles into its daily rhythm, not everyone leaves for the fields or the sea. Some remain behind. The longhouse, so quiet only an hour ago, becomes the heart of family life once again. To modern eyes, it might seem small, dark, and simple. Yet for a Viking family, this single building is far more than a house. It is a shelter against winter storms, a workshop, a kitchen, a place of learning, and above all, it is home. From the outside, the longhouse appears strong and solid. Its thick timber walls are carefully fitted together, built to withstand years of wind, rain, and heavy snow. The roof is covered with layers of turf and grass. In spring and summer, tiny wildflowers sometimes bloom across its surface, making the house seem almost like a natural part of the hillside itself. There are no glass windows. Only small openings allow light and fresh air to enter. Because of this, the inside remains dim for much of the day. But the Vikings do not mind. Their eyes have grown used to the soft glow of firelight. The hearth remains the center of everything. The fire is never simply a source of warmth. It is where meals are cooked, where wet clothes are dried, where tools are repaired, where stories are shared long after the sun has disappeared beyond the mountains. Without the fire, life during the northern winter would be almost impossible. Near the hearth, an elderly grandmother quietly spins wool into thread. Her hands move slowly, steadily, without hesitation. She has repeated this simple task thousands of times. She no longer thinks about each movement. Her fingers remember what her mind no longer needs to command. Beside her, a young girl watches carefully. She says very little. She simply observes. This is how knowledge is passed from one generation to the next, not through books, not through classrooms, but through patient observation and years of practice. Across the room, another woman sits beside a wooden chest filled with carefully folded clothing. Every garment has taken weeks, sometimes months, to create. The wool first had to be collected from sheep, then washed, carded, spun into thread, dyed with plants gathered from forests and fields. Finally, every stitch was sewn by hand. A single cloak represented hundreds of hours of quiet work. Nothing inside the longhouse is easily replaced. A broken bowl is repaired. A torn tunic is carefully stitched. A cracked wooden handle is carved again, instead of thrown away. The Vikings waste very little, not because they wish to, but because every object has value. Outside, children laugh as they chase one another through the grass. Their games require no expensive toys. A smooth stone, a carved piece of wood, or simply imagination is often enough to fill an afternoon with adventure. Nearby, an old man sits on a wooden stool beneath the morning sun. A block of oak rests across his knees. Using only a sharp knife, he slowly shapes the wood into the handle of a new farming tool. Small curls of fresh wood fall silently onto the ground. The smell of newly cut timber drifts gently through the cool air. There is no hurry. Good work cannot be rushed. The old craftsman understands this well. Every careful cut today may allow the tool to serve the family for many years to come. And inside the longhouse, as the fire continues to burn softly and quiet, conversations drift through the smoky air. Life moves forward, just as it has for countless seasons. Not with excitement, not with glory, but with patience, purpose, and the quiet comfort of home. The village craftsman and the quiet rhythm of work. As the afternoon sun casts longer shadows across the village, the pace of work begins to change. The fields remain busy, but another kind of labor quietly continues among the wooden houses. This is the work that rarely appears in old stories. No songs are sung about it. No legends are written. Yet without these skilled hands, a Viking village could never survive. Near the center of the settlement, the steady sound of metal striking metal echoes softly through the air. Clang. A brief pause. Then another measured strike. Inside a small wooden workshop, the village blacksmith stands beside a glowing fire. The heat is intense, even on a cool northern afternoon. His face glistens with sweat as he carefully removes a piece of red-hot iron from the coals. He lays it upon a heavy stone anvil. Then, with slow and practiced movements, he shapes the metal, one careful blow at a time. Each strike has purpose. Too hard, and the iron may crack. Too soft, and it may never become the tool the farmer needs. Patience is as valuable as strength. Nearby, finished tools rest neatly against the wall. Axes for cutting timber, knives for preparing food, nails for repairing boats. Simple farming tools that will soon return to the fields. These objects may seem ordinary, but each one represents many hours of skilled work. Across the village, another craftsman quietly shapes wood. Long curls of pale pine fall onto the floor with every careful cut of his knife. He is repairing the handle of a fishing oar. His fingers move with remarkable confidence. He hardly needs to measure. Years of experience have taught his hands exactly where each cut should be. Outside, A young apprentice watches silently. He asks few questions. Instead, he learns by observing every movement. Knowledge is not rushed. It is earned through time. Farther along the narrow path, several women gather beneath the shade of a large tree. Bundles of freshly washed wool rest beside them. One slowly spins soft fibers into fine thread. Another carefully guides thread across a simple loom. The gentle tapping of wood against wood creates a quiet rhythm that blends with birdsong and the distant sound of waves. Piece by piece, thread by thread, warm clothing begins to take shape. A cloak, a blanket, perhaps a pair of woolen stockings that will protect someone during the coming winter. Every stitch matters. There are no factories, no machines. Everything that surrounds the family has passed through someone's patient hands. As the afternoon continues, a small trading boat appears beyond the mouth of the fjord. It moves slowly across the calm water, its square sail gently filled by the wind. The villagers notice it almost immediately. Trade is an important part of Viking life. Not every village can produce everything it needs. Sometimes iron arrives from distant lands, sometimes salt, sometimes fine cloth, glass beads, or beautiful amber collected along faraway shores. The visitors step onto the wooden dock with friendly smiles. There is no loud marketplace, no shouting merchants, only quiet conversations between people who understand the value of trust. A bundle of fine animal furs is exchanged for carefully forged tools. Several jars of honey change hands. A fisherman offers dried cod in return for precious salt. Nothing is hurried. Every agreement is made face to face. Every promise depends upon reputation. In this small community, a person's word is often worth more than silver. As the trading boat prepares to leave, the villagers return to their daily routines. The blacksmith places another piece of iron into the glowing fire. The carpenter smooths another piece of timber. The women continue weaving beside the afternoon breeze. Life flows gently onward, carried not by great moments of history, but by thousands of quiet tasks that together keep an entire village alive. And while distant kingdoms may remember the names of kings and warriors, it is these forgotten craftsmen, these patient workers, who truly build the Viking world. The flood into the cities. To understand why a stranger could knock on a stranger's door and be handed a room, a bed, and a place at the dinner table, you have to understand just how fast the 19th century was changing. In the year 1800, London was home to roughly 900,000 people. It was already one of the largest cities on Earth. But by 1900, just 1 century later, that number had exploded past 6 million. 6 times larger. And London wasn't unique. Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, nearly every industrial city on both sides of the Atlantic was swelling at a pace no one had ever seen before, and no one was quite prepared for. Why? The answer, in a word, is industry. Factories were rising where fields used to be. Railways were stitching the countryside to the city faster than any stagecoach ever could. And with every new mill, every new office, every new railway line, came the same hungry question. Who is going to do all this work? The answer came from the countryside. Week after week, month after month, young men and women packed what little they owned and left behind the farms, villages, and small towns where their families had lived for generations. They weren't fleeing disaster. Most of them were chasing something simpler, a wage, a chance. a life beyond the field they'd been born into. But here is the detail that so often gets left out of the history books. Almost none of these young migrants could afford, or even wanted, to rent an entire house. Think about what that would actually require in the 1800s. Furniture, coal for a fire, in every room, every day. A working knowledge of cooking, laundry, cleaning, skills many young factory workers, particularly young men, simply didn't have. And even if they had the skills, they didn't have the time. A typical workday in a Victorian factory or shop could stretch 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours. There was no leftover energy to scrub floors or bake bread after a shift like that. So a new kind of arrangement quietly filled the gap. Not a hotel. Those were for travelers, and far too expensive for anyone earning a factory wage. Not a family member's home, because increasingly, these young workers had no family in the city at all. Instead, an entirely different institution rose up in nearly every industrial neighborhood: the boarding house. Historian Wendy Gamber, who has spent much of her career studying this exact institution, put it simply: those who couldn't cook for themselves paid someone else to cook for them. That's the boarding house in a single sentence. But behind that simple description was an entire hidden economy, an entire social world that we've almost completely forgotten. Let's look at just how widespread this really was. According to the 1850 census in England, roughly 1 in every 8 households included a lodger, not a guest, not a relative staying over the holidays, a paying stranger sleeping under the same roof as a family that, in most cases, had never met them before the day they moved in. And in certain cities, Nottingham, York, and other fast-growing industrial towns, that number climbed even higher, to nearly 1 household in 5. Pause on that for a moment. In some cities, walking down any given street, you could knock on 1 door in 5 and find a stranger living inside, paying rent to sleep in what used to be someone's spare bedroom, or parlor, or attic. This wasn't a fringe arrangement. This wasn't unusual or scandalous. By the mid-1800s, taking in lodgers had become one of the most ordinary things a household could do, as common as owning a dog or attending church on Sunday. And it wasn't confined to England either. Across the Atlantic, American cities were experiencing an almost identical transformation. Boston, Philadelphia, New York, all absorbing waves of both domestic migrants from rural America and immigrants arriving fresh off the ships from Ireland, Germany, Italy, and beyond. Historians estimate that at the height of the boarding house era, as much as a third of urban Americans either boarded in someone else's home or took boarders into their own. A third. Think about that. In some decades, boarding wasn't the exception to normal city life. It very nearly was normal city life. So who opened their doors to all these strangers? Who decided to turn a spare room, or in many cases, several rooms, sometimes an entire house, into a lodging business? Overwhelmingly, the answer is women. And this is where the story of the boarding house becomes something much more than just a housing arrangement. It becomes the story of a very particular kind of Victorian woman. One who, through circumstance rather than choice, became one of the only kinds of businesswomen her society would tolerate. We'll meet her properly in the next part of tonight's story. But for now, picture her standing in that doorway. The woman behind the brass plaque that reads "Rooms Available," about to let a stranger into her home her table, and in many ways, her life. Because running a boarding house was never simply about renting out a bed. It meant feeding, managing, and often quietly caring for a rotating cast of strangers, clerks, factory girls, sailors between voyages, students, immigrants fresh off the boat, and occasionally someone whose past or intentions were not quite what they seemed. And that's where our story is about to take its first turn. As evening gently settles over the village, the afternoon slowly slips away. The golden light that covered the fields begins to fade, replaced by the soft colors of evening. Long shadows stretch across the narrow paths between the houses. The air grows cooler once again. A gentle breeze drifts down from the mountains, carrying the familiar scent of pine forests, damp earth, and the distant sea. One by one, the villagers begin their journey home. The fishermen return first. Their small boats glide quietly across the calm water, barely making a sound. Some boats carry baskets filled with cod and herring. Others return with only a modest catch. No one complains. The sea has always been unpredictable. A good fisherman learns to accept both generous days and disappointing ones with equal patience. Along the shoreline, families gather to help pull the boats safely onto the beach. Heavy ropes tighten. Wood softly scrapes against smooth stones. Children eagerly rush forward, hoping to see what the sea has offered today. Nearby, farmers also return from the fields. Their shoulders ache after hours of lifting, digging, and carrying. Mud clings to their boots. Their hands are rough and tired. Yet there is quiet satisfaction in honest work completed before sunset. Inside the longhouse, the fire has already been burning for some time. Its warm orange light dances across the timber walls. Fresh pieces of oak and birch crackle gently as sparks drift upward through the smoke hole in the roof. The familiar warmth welcomes everyone home. Soon, the evening meal begins. A large iron pot hangs above the fire once again. This evening, a simple stew slowly simmers. Barley, cabbage, onions, wild herbs collected from nearby hills, and small pieces of fresh fish caught only hours earlier. The rich aroma fills every corner of the house. Wooden bowls are passed from hand to hand. Everyone waits patiently until each member of the family has received their share. No one eats alone. Meals are moments of togetherness. Not because life is easy, but because sharing even the simplest food strengthens the family. Conversation remains gentle. Someone quietly speaks about repairing a broken fence tomorrow. Another mentions that the weather feels colder than usual. An elderly grandfather smiles as he watches the youngest child proudly describe finding a bird's feather in the forest. Small moments like these rarely appear in history books, yet they are the moments that truly filled most Viking lives. Outside, daylight slowly disappears behind the western hills. The sky turns from pale blue to soft orange, then deep shades of purple. One by one, bright stars begin to appear above the quiet fjord. The sea reflects the first evening lights, like polished glass. A cool silence settles across the village. Only a distant sheep calls from the hillside. Somewhere near the forest, an owl begins its nightly hunt. The gentle sound of waves continues its endless conversation with the shore. Inside the longhouse, the fire burns lower now. Some family members quietly repair clothing beneath its warm glow. Others carve small wooden objects while talking softly. There is no hurry to finish. Tomorrow will bring another day, another sunrise, Another opportunity to continue the simple rhythm of life that has shaped this village for generations. For the Vikings, happiness is rarely found in great celebrations. More often, it is found here, in the warmth of home, in familiar voices, in a shared meal, and in the comforting knowledge that everyone has returned safely before nightfall. As darkness gently wraps itself around the little village, peace settles over every roof, every field, and every quiet path beside the sea. The long northern night, and the stories by the fire night, has now fully embraced the village. Beyond the walls of the longhouse, darkness stretches across the fjord like a soft blanket. The mountains have become little more than quiet silhouettes against a sky filled with countless stars. There are no street lamps, no glowing windows in distant towns, no sound of passing traffic, only the gentle whisper of the wind moving through the pine trees and the steady rhythm of the sea touching the shore. Inside the longhouse, however, the world feels warm. The fire still burns at the center of the room. Its orange light flickers across the wooden walls, filling the house with dancing shadows that quietly come and go. Every now and then, a small piece of wood cracks in the flames. Tiny sparks rise toward the smoke hole before disappearing into the darkness above. The day's hardest work is over. Now comes one of the most peaceful moments in Viking life. Families gather close together, not because they are required to, but because warmth, conversation, and companionship make the long northern nights feel much shorter. An elderly grandfather sits near the fire. His hair has turned the color of fresh winter snow. His hands are worn and rough after decades spent fishing, farming, and repairing tools. Across from him, several children settle onto thick wool blankets. They know what is coming. A story. Not every evening brings a tale of mighty gods or fearless warriors. Sometimes the stories are much simpler. A clever fox escaping a hunter, a fisherman caught in an unexpected storm, a neighbor whose kindness saved another family during a difficult winter. These quiet stories carry lessons just as valuable as the great legends. They teach patience, honesty, courage, generosity, and respect for the natural world. For the Vikings, stories are more than entertainment. They are memory. Long before books became common, history traveled from one generation to the next through spoken words. Every storyteller became a living library. Every listener carried those memories into the future. As the children listen, some begin to yawn. One little boy leans against his mother's shoulder. A young girl slowly closes her eyes, comforted by the familiar voices surrounding her. Outside, the cold grows stronger. A gentle frost begins to form across the grass. The stars shine brighter than ever in the clear northern sky. Somewhere beyond the village, a wolf howls in the distance. The sound is soft, mysterious. Yet no one inside the longhouse seems afraid. The sturdy timber walls have protected generations before them. Tonight will be no different. Before long, the family begins preparing for sleep. The fire is carefully reduced, but never completely extinguished. A few glowing embers remain hidden beneath fresh ash. By morning, those tiny sparks will once again become the fire that warms the home and cooks another simple breakfast. Blankets woven from thick wool are spread across the wooden sleeping benches. Animal skins provide extra warmth against the cold night air. One by one, quiet conversations come to an end. The house grows still. The only sounds that remain are slow breathing, the gentle crackling of the fire, and the distant waves endlessly washing against the rocky shore. for another ordinary Viking day has come to a peaceful close. No great battle was fought. No kingdom was conquered. No famous hero changed the course of history. Yet for the family sleeping safely beneath this roof, today was a successful day. They worked, they shared food, they cared for one another, and together they welcomed another quiet night beneath the stars of the far north. As sleep gently settles over the village, silence returns once more. The same comforting silence that has embraced these shores for countless generations. A gentle farewell to the Viking world. The night has become wonderfully still. The fire at the center of the longhouse is now little more than a bed of glowing embers. Their soft orange light gently fades with each passing moment, casting quiet shadows that slowly dance across the wooden walls. Outside, the village is asleep. The fishing boats rest peacefully beside the shore, rising and falling ever so slightly with the gentle movement of the water. The sheep lie together upon the hillside. The chickens remain safely inside their small wooden shelter. Even the faithful village dog has curled itself into a warm corner, dreaming through another peaceful northern night. Above everything, the stars continue their silent journey across the endless sky. More than 1,000 years have passed since nights like this were part of everyday life. The Viking villages have changed. Many of their wooden homes have long since returned to the earth. The voices that once filled these valleys have faded into history. Yet, in many ways, their lives were not so different from our own. They worried about tomorrow. They hoped their children would grow strong and healthy. They worked hard for those they loved. They celebrated small victories. They faced difficult winters, and at the end of every long day, they found comfort in returning home. History often tells us about kings, battles, and great discoveries. Those stories are important, but they are only one part of the past. The quieter stories, the ordinary stories, belong to millions of people whose names were never written down. The farmer who carefully planted every seed, the mother who patiently wove warm clothing through the winter, the fisherman who trusted the sea each morning, the blacksmith whose tools helped an entire village survive, the grandfather whose gentle stories lived on through his grandchildren. They built no great empires, yet they built something equally meaningful: a life, a family, a community. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson the Vikings leave behind. Not every meaningful life becomes famous. Sometimes a good life is simply one lived with honesty, patience, kindness, and quiet determination. As we prepare to leave this peaceful village, take one last slow walk along the shoreline. The cool night air feels fresh upon your face. Gentle waves continue their endless conversation with the land. Far above, the northern stars shine just as brightly as they did 1,000 years ago. For a brief moment, everything feels wonderfully still. The modern world seems very far away. There are no messages waiting, no deadlines, no hurried footsteps, only silence and the comforting rhythm of nature. As the first hint of tomorrow's dawn waits patiently beyond the eastern horizon, the Viking village remains wrapped in peaceful sleep. Soon another ordinary day will begin. Another fire will be lit. Another loaf of bread will be shared. Another fishing boat will leave the shore. Life will quietly continue, just as it always has. Thank you for joining this peaceful journey into the everyday world of the Vikings. May their quiet way of life remind us that even in the busiest times, There is value in slowing down, in appreciating simple moments, and in finding peace within the ordinary. Sleep well. And until our next journey through history, good night.